All right, good morning, Facebook. My name is Wolfgang Krosky. I am the CEO of the Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, and we have today a great opportunity to hear from several of the candidates who are running for office. And with us right now, we have District Attorney Diana Becton, who is seeking re-election and is looking for everybody's vote. And we're going to have an opportunity to talk with her, ask some questions. This is the Chamber of Commerce, so all of our questions do kind of focus on the business community. But I know that her campaign, along with all of the candidates running for the different offices, have ways for you to reach out and connect with them. And District Attorney Becton will share how you can reach out to her if there's other questions that you may have or want to learn more about her platform and what she's running on. So, with that, District Attorney Becton, tell us a little bit about who you are and how your career and how you've gotten
Sure.
to this point.
Absolutely. And good morning. And
Yes.
thank you so much for having me. It's actually a pleasure to be able to speak with you today a little bit about my background and how I arrived here in the space. And of course, before being appointed as a judge, which I served this county for a number of years, I was an attorney. I had a private practice, a very successful practice. And then I was eventually tapped by Governor Wilson to become a judge in the Superior Court of Contra Costa County. I held that position as a judge for 22 years.
Oh, wow.
And I would say that it uniquely really prepares me to be able to sit in this seat as district attorney. During that time, I was elected as presiding judge, which means I was over the entire court, and a $54 million budget, which again gives me the experience to run an office like the district attorneys, which is pretty much in this position is more of an administrative position than it is that of a day-to-day line
Mm-hmm.
prosecutor. And so I also had the pleasure to not only preside over complex criminal cases and civil cases, but also environmental cases and consumer cases and juvenile, all kinds of work that will touch the district attorney's office and about which I have to make decisions every day. I also served as the president of the National Association of Women Judges, the nation's leading voice for women in the judiciary, and I was also chair of the State Bar Council in Access and Fairness. Currently, I serve at the pleasure of the governor on two pivotal committees. I am the public member for the State Victims Compensation Board, ensuring that these victims of crime receive fair and just compensation, and also working to change laws and legislation in that area so that we can reach a wider number of those who might be victims of crime. And I also serve on the Governor's Judicial Selection Advisory Committee. It gives me an opportunity to, on behalf of the governor, vet those who might become the next judges, not only here in Contra Costa County, but around Northern California. So I came to this position in 2017. If you all remember, the former district attorney pled to felony charges and resigned. I was one of 12 candidates who applied for the position and appointed by the board, and then duly elected by the people in 2018. One of the reasons that people elected me was to kind of clean up the district attorney's office. It had been known for scandals and sex scandals and fights in the hall and poor administration. And so I've had the opportunity to work on that over the last few years, but then also to not only keep our communities safe, because everyone wants to feel safe in our communities, but also to bring a lens of equity and fairness to our system.
Awesome. So, for those that may, you hear the district attorney's office and it sounds important. I know it's important, but what exactly does a district attorney's office do and the district attorney? I mean, because you talk about your background as a judge, and I think that provides a lot of value. But as a whole, what does the district attorney's office do for those that aren't familiar with that?
Sure. The victims, the victims, the district attorney's office has a wide range of responsibility and a wide range of power and discretion, if you will, in terms of what happens in the conversation around public safety and what happens in the conversation about when people are to be held accountable for the
Hmm.
crimes that they commit, and also to be a very strong voice and advocate for victims of crime within our community. We actually have the opportunity to set the direction. For example, we get to decide who gets charged and what gets charged. We have a strong voice in sentencing and plea bargaining, and we also have a strong voice in thinking about not only what we do in terms of prosecution, but also how we show up in our community in other ways in terms of education and prevention, which are other important ways that we keep our community safe.
Awesome. And so you talk about, the role of helping victims, and I think sometimes when people hear the word victims, they think individuals, but sometimes those victims can be businesses. And so
Absolutely.
the district attorney's office, how do they integrate with the business community when the business is a victim of crime?
So it really it is an important question because you're right. We also think of individuals as being
Hmm.
victimized, but a business community is certainly a very important part of that communication. So part of it again is meeting with those organizations like the
Hmm.
Chamber of Commerce and other organizations that represent businesses large and small. I have, for example, met with those who manage many of our large shopping malls, for example, to talk to them about, how to keep the environment of the shopping mall safe, things from better signage, all kinds of things that we can talk about in terms of prevention and education of our community about community safety, and really working together in that conversation about what community safety looks like, what role we can play from law enforcement, and what kinds of things our business community can do as well to be proactive about public safety and about prevention. And so all of that works hand in hand. I would say it is, education, it is awareness, it is prevention, but that it is also accountability and on our end as well.
Absolutely. And I know, as a chamber, we hear lots of businesses say, "Oh, nothing gets done." I'm sure you've heard they don't
Yes.
prosecute, right?
Yeah.
And you hear that, and so the small businesses that are victimized, like I saw in the news, CHP had a large retail theft ring that they was like over $700,000 worth of merchandise, and
Mhm.
that's huge. But then there's the small businesses that somebody goes in and takes all their chips, or
Mhm.
smash and grab or
Sure.
whatever. How While you've been a DA, how have you helped with those types of crimes? For those the smaller business victims,
Sure.
so to speak.
So let me speak about both because you
Okay.
mentioned the smash and
Yep.
grabs, the big ones, and
Yeah.
and that's important too. And it's been a driver of conversation. We all know all too well about what happened in November when 90
Yeah.
individuals stormed the Nordstroms, going into three separate entrances, also simultaneously, to smash and grab and get everything that they could out of those stores. And so we were immediately engaged, not only here with our local law enforcement, but also with district attorney's offices up and down the state. It's a very important piece because we know that those who are committing crime of this nature are organized, and we have to be organized as well. And those who are committing crime in Contra Costa County today might be in Santa Clara tomorrow. So
Hmm.
I am working with district attorneys San Joaquin, uh, um, Santa Clara, Alameda, San Mateo. We're all in conversation and coordinating our resources, and not only coordinating our resources in our prosecutorial information, but also coordinating resources with federal and state and local law enforcement. So we have the best intelligence that we can to be able to hold those accountable who are committing these crimes. I've been able to announce some major cases, even with the Attorney General's office, that we have had a part of in making sure that those who are apprehended are definitely held accountable for these crimes. Excuse me. In addition to that, everyone that has been apprehended has been charged with serious felony crimes, including organized retail theft and robbery, and they are now moving through our court system with
Hmm.
due speed. Far as the smaller businesses, it's a much more difficult problem because we can crime, just as it affects us all when it's on a big scale, it also affects us small businesses business, and sometimes even in a harsher way,
Yes.
because the smaller business doesn't have the resources to just
Right.
jump
People say will
back.
say, well, just they should just follow claim with their insurance, since like you clearly don't understand how it works.
Yeah.
There's the deductibles. There's you
Hmm.
may be underinsured, etc. And
Absolutely.
it is.
Absolutely.
I think you put it right. It does hurt more on the
it
smaller.
it hurts significantly. And so the message for our smaller business has to be really the same, that we all have to make sure that we have systems of accountability in place, right? And so when your law enforcement is called, when these things happen and law enforcement is called, we have to make sure that law enforcement, and I am all in favor of good policing, and so we have to make sure law enforcement is doing what law enforcement is needed to do, and that is using their resources to catch and to apprehend those
Hmm.
people who might have committed these crimes. Very often, by the time law enforcement comes, the person who committed the crime has gone already, and no one is ever apprehended, and that's unfortunate, but it does happen very frequently. And also, we also recognize that because of resource issues, a lot of our law enforcement agencies are not even responding to smaller businesses sometimes when they're calling about theft issues. And so all of those things have to be part of our conversation, because if no one is ever apprehended, they can't be brought into the district attorney's office for any kind of accountability. And we have lots of ways to hold people accountable, even for the smaller crimes. We have many diversion programs which help hold people accountable. And
So what's a diversion program? So people may
yes,
not know exactly what that is.
absolutely. And so a diversion program can operate in a number of ways. It can operate after charges are filed, and in the court system, we give people an opportunity, maybe in lieu of jail, to be able to be held accountable. But we also have other ways that we hold people accountable. For example, um, we have our neighborhood restorative partnership, which I have just launched, which is a partnership with our communities, with
Hmm.
our businesses, where individuals from our community are trained by professionals using a restorative lens. And so it is basically a way of continuing to reduce our footprint in the criminal justice system, but still holding people accountable. And what does it look like? Well, suppose somebody comes and paints graffiti on the side of your business, and you're not going to be happy about that at all.
Nope, I will not be happy with that.
And so this community accountability panel of three people who have been trained to listen
Hmm.
and to try to get to root causes, they're going to find out, what do you need to be made whole? And so obviously you want your property to be restored to where it was before. And there are actually nonprofits who will come out and help with that process.
Okay.
And so maybe the person who committed the crime, when we get to the root cause of why they did it, will be made to volunteer a day to restore your building. So this, you've been made whole, the person has been made accountable, and the community has had a way to heal as well and to be a part of that process. And the reason these programs are so important is because the criminal justice system, cannot handle all of the cases that we push into the system. I've had to answer to our courts who say, how are you going to start eliminating some of the misdemeanor crimes that come into our system? Because the courts can't handle them. We need to be using our courtrooms to try the more serious cases, and we try them every single day. The rape, the sexual assaults, the robbery, all of those kinds of cases have to have a courtroom, and we have limited number of courtrooms. So the courtroom encourages us to try to have alternatives for the smaller misdemeanor crimes. In addition to that, the county CAO's office has asked us to find alternatives as well. The public defender's office has to often conflict out of cases, meaning they can't handle the cases because we get too many of them in the system. That means our county has to pay for private attorneys to represent in all of these cases, and it
Got it.
costs all of us money.
Sure.
And so we have been asked, and we have done a great job, not only working with a small group of police chiefs to come up with these alternatives, so that we're still holding people accountable for their behavior, but at the same time reducing our footprint in the criminal justice system.
How can businesses or business owners or business leaders, how can they get engaged in that program so that
Oh,
there's a voice from the business community on
absolutely.
there?
We would love, for example, there's several ways, and I think One is that we would have an opportunity to meet with you regularly in our business community to be able to hear your concerns and make sure that the work that we're doing is responsive to your needs. And I'd love to give you an example of that. And then, in addition to that, to sign up to be volunteers if you have
Mm-hmm.
the bandwidth to do so. The applications for our Neighborhood Restorative Partnership are online on the district attorney's website, and you can sign up if you have that kind of time to engage, and we would certainly welcome. We need volunteers from the Pittsburgh community because we have lots of volunteers from Central County, but very few. From East County.
East
So
County.
that would be very welcome. One of the things that we did, for example, on 23rd Street in West County, we learned from our community and from the businesses on that street that we had a huge problem with sex workers and prostitution on that street. And after complaining and complaining to really deaf ears, I asked the city to come with me to meet with the business owners, to meet with the community residents. And we together formulated the plan about what public safety should look like going forward, how we would be involved in the process to get resources that the community needed, like
Mm-hmm.
additional lighting at night. They also needed to have education in the schools. And so we sent our prosecutors into the schools to educate our girls and our boys about the dangers of human trafficking. And then we've done community cleanups, community awareness, and I'm right there in the mix with everybody else. We're cleaning up our community. We're making sure that our businesses put up signs about the signs of trafficking and hotlines to call. And so we love to be involved with our business community. And I'd say call on us. We would love to come to your meetings. We can come with law enforcement. We can come also with my own investigative staff and work together to address issues of community safety because everybody wants to feel safe in their communities and we deserve to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I think about the community of Pittsburgh, and my wife and I are raising kids. They go to school here, have a business here, and you want to be safe at all hours of the night and be able to go about your life and
Yes.
recognize that you need to make space for everybody. But at the end of the day, there are some people who are just determined to not make life safe for some, and
That's
they
right.
have to be held accountable. So with that, shifting conversation, what challenges do you see that businesses are going to be facing now and in the near future?
Mhm.
What are some of the top
Yeah,
challenges you see businesses facing?
I think one of the things that it's going to be an important conversation for us to have is to make sure that we are going forward. We are having these conversations about community safety, business safety, using facts and not fear, and making sure that we're working hand in hand, not only with the district attorney's office, but with our local law enforcement. Or historically, over the last 20 years, crime has been declining, but we have seen an uptick in a couple of areas. Theft is one of those areas,
Mm-hmm.
and also so property crimes, and also crimes relating to automobiles and vehicles. We are definitely trying to working right now with county officials and other law enforcement agencies to try to stand up a task force, a new task force. I already have that I co-lead the FBI Safe Streets Task Force. It is a task force that focuses on those who are committing violent crime in our community to bring accountability there. But we're also now working to establish a task force that will help us to work on car burglaries and catalytic converter thefts, and also to break into those big rings that are driving some of that crime. So
Yeah.
that's one part of what we're doing. And then I think the other part of it is to make sure that we have open lines of communication and that we're working together in partnership about the definition of community safety, the resources that we need for community safety, and prevention and awareness, because there's lots that businesses can do on their own to be watching out for one another, sort of like a neighborhood watch, a
Mm-hmm.
business watch,
Right.
making sure that you're doing everything and taking advantage of all the tips that small businesses can use to keep your business safe, and then at the same time working hand in hand with law enforcement. So when unfortunately there is a victimization of a business, that we have the resources in place to be able to hold people who are apprehended accountable.
Does the DA's office have and I don't know what the proper term would be, like maybe an advisory panel or committee where you have people from different walks of life, whether it's people from the business community, maybe people from the faith based community, where
Hmm.
you can just use them as a sounding board and
Absolutely. I have, well, I wouldn't say they're all necessarily in one
right.
space. But I would say, as district attorney, one of the things that I've made sure to do is to be very accessible and available to everyone in our
Hmm.
community. So I meet with leaders. I just finished a meeting with leaders from our faith community and from our mental health community about their issues and concerns and how we can
Hmm.
work together. I work together with small businesses, work together with youth groups. I have an attorney who really is dedicated to being in our schools and educating our kids about guns and about gangs. And we have speakers. And so it's very often that in our community, business community, and other parts of our community, people want to know about different topics. And we have attorneys who can come out and talk to various community groups as well. We have an ICAC unit. People don't know much about that.
What is
Focuses
I've never what is that?
focuses on internet crimes against
Internet
children.
crime. Okay.
Yes, there's so many resources within our office that the community. If you go on our website, lots of them are listed there. We still have the small check program for businesses to sign up for when people pass small bad checks to our businesses within our community. Another resource that is available through our office. So there's tons of resources. And I'm making sure that we are working with and being responsive to our community. I have a hate crimes committee, for example, so that those who in our community who are victimized by those who might want to harm them,
Hmm.
because of their religion, because of their faith, because of what they look like. And so we have a special committee that evaluates those cases so that we can hold people accountable in that way. So there's just so many ways for us to partner. And I think the main thing to know is that the district attorney's office is here. We're available. We want to be a partner in the conversation about community safety.
Awesome. Now, anytime you run for office, there's people that like you on the fence and then those that don't like you, right? So
Absolutely.
here's a tough question. Those that feel that you shouldn't be reelected, what do you have to say to them? Or, what, th- sell them, right? Convince them that Diana Becton's the
Yeah.
choice. What's.
There are lots of reasons why I'm the best candidate. And I told you a lot about my
Hmm.
qualifications as well. But so much of the conversation about why I should not be reelected is really driven, first of all, by misinformation, and it's also driven by fear. And that's why I urge our community to lead with facts, especially as it relates to crime. We can make available the crime data to show our community that crime really has been going down, even in Contra Costa County. We were one of only 4 counties in the whole state of California that during the last couple of years, we saw our homicide rate, for example, go down when other counties were having huge
Hmm.
spikes. And so the picture is not what people want to paint it to be.
Do you think that's the
Also,
biggest myth, is that people feel that crime is under your command, that crime is just
I
skyrocketed, or
I think
what do you
I
think's the
think
biggest
that's
myth?
I think that's one of the biggest myths, but there's
Okay.
a lot, and I want to get to some of this
Okay.
misinformation too that is being pushed out there and really trying to create fear in our community. And that's why I keep saying deal with the facts. One of the pieces of misinformation is that we don't hold people accountable, and
Hmm.
that's just absolutely not true. I've mentioned to you that we have lots of ways to do that, and so yes, it might be true that we're not necessarily charging a person, but we also have the diversion programs that I've explained already where we can hold people accountable, especially when people are committing really small crimes. Um, we've worked with our law enforcement to encourage them to bundle those cases so that we can process them through our court system as well. Another big myth is that we have said that looters are not going to be held accountable. That looters can take things if they need something. This is the craziest idea that I've ever heard of. When the looting legislation was adopted, if you all can remember, it was back after the Rodney King riots. And this legislation is really aimed at there being a situation where there's a complete state of chaos,
Right.
and you have people who are then in the midst of that chaos taking advantage of it and
Yeah.
harming businesses,
Opportunistic
especially
people. Yep.
small businesses, especially. And so that's what the legislation was designed to do. And so here in Contra Costa County, during COVID-19, and we're mainly talking about theft related
Right.
cases, right?
Yep.
And so people before the pandemic, after the pandemic, they were committing theft related crimes, they were committing
Hmm.
robberies. And believe you me, if you look at our statistics, we have been charging those cases for years and holding people accountable for years. Nothing changed during the pandemic. But the rumor happened, and that is because we found out that one of our filers had filed a case that came out of East County where a man had gone into the store and stuffed a beef jerky and one other item down his pants. It was a theft,
Yeah.
yes, and should be held accountable, but it was not looting. But he was charged with looting. And so when that came to the attention of my management team, they said, wait a minute, we ought to have some guidelines so that when our filers are filing cases, we know what to look for when we're thinking about whether something is or isn't a looting charge and should be charged accordingly. Sometimes people break into a business. That is a burglary. We're going to
Right.
charge that case. It doesn't mean that because it happened during the pandemic that it is somehow a looting charge. But that's what was happening. And we also found a disparity because most of those cases were being charged on the west end of our county. So my management team laid out all of these guidelines to follow. They're not absolutes, but they're guidelines
Sure.
to say these are the ways that you can recognize a looting case. And when one of our managers said, well, you should have something in there about need, it's not need like you need a pair of tennis shoes there before you can go take it. It is need as if you are in a dire life and death situation where you need water, for example, because you're going to die of thirst and there's no water available, so you can walk into a business in that way. And so that's the idea behind it. But somehow that has been miscommunicated intentionally to our community to say that I have a policy that says if you need tennis shoes, you can go take them. It's just an absolute untruth. So things
Is
of
it
that nature.
possible? I mean, the whole need thing. How do you define? You've defined it pretty well, but I
I think
think
it's life and
people
death
could.
need.
Is it possible that people could? I've seen in law and real estate law that terms get
Yeah,
kind of
but
that
yeah,
definition swings.
but that's why
So
we have checks and balances,
right.
and that's why we have supervisors look at these cases as well, so that it's not left up to the whim of an individual to say, "Oh, well, they needed that; it's okay." No, that's not
Hmm.
at all what we're talking about. And then it's also important to know that looting does carry additional penalties, and the
Right.
irony is that when we did have a lot of looting cases, you might remember the cases
Hmm.
in 2020, where after the George Floyd decision,
Right.
people went into a number of businesses and stole, and we charged all of those cases where people were apprehended. We charged them with serious crimes, including looting, but and the looting being not only what we felt people were taking advantage, but also the COVID-19 emergency. But I will just say that the courts disagreed. And the court said, no, yeah, these can proceed as regular theft crimes, but they are not looting. And so, people want to blame the district attorney's office for things that we just are not responsible for.
For example, the shoplifting. Everybody knows the. I've heard between $950 and $1,000 rule, right?
Yes.
That you don't get to create that
That's
rule, right?
legislatively
Right.
driven. That was changed by Prop 47 to say that and it doesn't mean there's no accountability. It
Hmm.
just means before you reach the threshold of having a felony charge, that the theft has to be $950 or more. If it's less, it's still a misdemeanor. You still could go to jail for up to a year. So it is not the same as saying there's no accountability. And keep in mind that there are many states like Texas, which is a much more strict law and order state than California. Their threshold is $2,000. And so it's not unreasonable that we have that threshold, but people should not take it to mean that there's no accountability. It just
Hmm.
is the threshold for when you can be charged with a felony.
Yeah, absolutely. So, assuming your campaign goes well, you get reelected. What will be your top two priorities? You know.
Sure. I'm working on a number of things that I think are really important. One of them is legislation to increase the resources that we have for victims of crime, to make sure, because a lot of times people are victimized, but there's nowhere to go, nowhere to get help, nowhere to get resources at the time that you really need it
Hmm.
when you're in that crisis. So I'm certainly working on legislation that will increase the resources available so that there can be a 24/7 hotline. I'm also working on data and transparency, which has been a huge thing, I think, for the public. People want to know, what are we doing, right?
Yeah, he talked about go find the facts, don't go on the
Yeah.
fear, and I'm like, I don't know where. I mean, as a chamber CEO, I know where I can go, but for the average person, it's like, well, where do you go to get these facts? So like,
Well, you can ask us, for example, and I
right,
can give them to
yeah,
you. But at the same time, something that I'm trying to stand up now, I'm working with Measures for Justice, is to be able to stand up our own dashboard. So you can go to the district attorney's website, and there you'll be able to see what has come into our office, what kinds of cases we've looked at, what we've charged, and how that prosecution has ended.
hmm,
And so that dashboard, I think, will be a valuable resource to the community. You won't have to keep asking us for
yeah,
information. It will be right there. You can click a button and have all of those statistics available to you. Also, we hope to be able to show you what has also happened even before a case comes into our office. Like, what are the cases where law enforcement is going out? Where have they actually been able to solve and apprehend? Find someone that they can bring to our office. So all of that information, I believe, is critical for our community to know about, and certainly we are seeking ways to let the community know about that. I'm very pleased to also always report that our sexual assault test kits are up to date. And going forward, I've just put in place a new electronic tracking system so that they never get behind again. So we're very pleased about that. And really continuing to work on places where we find disparities and inequities in our system, to also work on those issues as well. So community safety, always first, working on prevention and awareness directly with our communities, but also making sure that there's equity and fairness in our system. So we're not continuing the old failed policies of the past, which has led us to these high rates of incarceration, led us to places of high rates of disparities in terms of race and ethnicity, and really trying to drive new policies that can change those trajectories while still talking about the conversation of community safety.
awesome. Well, Dan, I really appreciate your time and having this
Thank you.
conversation. I could talk forever, but I know
It's a
that
long,
you're
good
busy
conversation.
and we could go on. But
Yes,
want to give you the opportunity because this is, for you to closing remarks,
sure.
whatever, the campaign elevators pitch, whatever you'd like to do. So,
Absolutely. Well, I think this is a good time to talk about the promises that I've made and the promises that I've kept. I did promise to make sure that our youth had a better chance, and so I'm very pleased that I was able to secure $1 million in order to um, establish the county's first restorative justice diversion program for our kids. It's victim centered, so victims have a voice, but also it holds our kids accountable, but gives them the resources that they need so that they don't come back into the criminal justice system. So, very pleased about that. I've established a human trafficking unit for our county. So, we have a robust now human trafficking unit that works on both labor and sex cases. And I have um, also established a cold case unit with new advances in technology. We now have an opportunity to use DNA to be able to go back and solve
hmm,
unsolved murder cases. Just last week, I was able to announce that we solved a 22-year-old murder case, and we were able to bring closure to that family. So, lots of things that we're doing for community safety, but we're also working with the Vera Institute. They're taking a deep dive into our data to help us see where our policies might be driving some of the disparities in our criminal justice system, making sure that we are removing our charging decisions away from cases involving substance abuse and instead sending folks into treatment as well as mental health cases, making sure that when appropriate we can get them into treatment as opposed to criminalization. Recognizing that we cannot prosecute our way out of issues like homelessness, issues like mental health, and issues like substance abuse. I am the East Bay Times endorsed candidate. I have the backing of so many amazing officials in our community. Please look on my website at dinabecton.com. All of our congressmen support me: DeSaulnier, Swalwell, Thompson, and McNerney, as well as Congressman Garamendi. Uh, our state legislatures support me: Rebecca Bauer Kahan, Nancy Skinner, Fiona Ma, Betty Yee, all support me. I'm supported by labor. I'm supported by um, environmentalists and transportation and educational leaders. So up and down all over this county, I am supported. I am the number one unanimously endorsed candidate by the Democratic Party, although this is a nonpartisan race. That is important for people to know as well. I hold the values of this community. I hold the values that say safe communities, but also a system that's equitable and fair for everyone. So thank you for taking the time to
Thank
talk
you.
with me.
Thank you. I
I
appreciate
appreciate
it.
it.
So it's again for those you can go to it's
.com.
dianabecton.com
Yes.
and go there and get more information, be able to contact. Want to thank everybody for watching. We do have later on this afternoon Ben Terrio, who is running for Contra Costa County Sheriff. And then we have Mary Knox, who is running for Contra Costa District Attorney as well. I do want to give an update. Ben Terrio is not going to be here at the scheduled time. He'll be at 3:45. So if you're waiting for that interview, do that. But again, it's
Thank you.
dianabecton.com, and thank you for your time
Thank you
and
so
making
much.
yourself available. So
I
thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.